couldn't cope with the fact that I wasn't busy. I went and spoke to a few people, I spoke to a few therapists, and one of them turned around to me and went, have you ever thought you might be addicted to stress? I was like, what? What do you mean? When you're in sports, you have to recover, right? Because if you don't recover, then you can't perform the following day. Well, it's exactly the same in our world. No one wants to stand still, everyone wants to grow stronger, and that becomes a better version of yourself every day. It's not all just about work and living life at 100 million miles an hour. Now, getting into my second part of my life, I like to think of it like that. I'm actually going to treat it differently to the first. I need to change. I need to fundamentally change if things are going to change in the future.
Welcome to the Upward Spiral podcast, where we explore the power of positive change and continuous improvement to help you create an upward spiral in all areas of your life. In today's episode, we're diving deep into a topic that affects so many high achievers: stress addiction and burnout. So if you're constantly pushing yourself to the limit, feeling like you're never doing enough and find it hard to slow down even when you're exhausted, this episode's for you. This episode's for me. I'm just reading that. I'm like, oh crap, yeah, this episode is actually for me too. I'm your host, Michelle O'Brien. A few years ago, I realized that my own relationship with alcohol was holding me back from achieving my dreams. And so I made the decision to quit drinking and create a life of positive momentum. And since quitting the drink, I have ran marathons, I've started a business, I've launched a podcast, I've joined a startup that is about to change the world. And on top of that, I'm being a mom to 2 young children, a wife and a friend. And if I'm being honest, I'm almost definitely addicted to the adrenaline that comes with the stress of probably leading such a busy life and pushing myself to extremes. And that's why I'm really excited about today's conversation. So today's guest is actually a special one. I think it might be the first person that I've interviewed that I've known for a while. We used to work together 16 years ago when I was an extremely young and naive advertising exec, and Matt was incredibly intimidating. He's got a wealth of experience in the high pressure environment of advertising and entrepreneurship. He's a transformational leader in creative and strategic marketing, a seasoned entrepreneur and managing consultant at Cactus, a global M&A advertising firm. And he's just launched, literally yesterday, a new startup agency, NoBull Partners, where he sets out to reset the outdated tactics of creative and PR with a more straight-talking, down-to-earth approach to brand building. With his sharp mind, impressive track record, he's here to share his personal journey and insights into overcoming stress addiction and burnout. Please can I welcome the one and only Matt Butterworth.
Hello.
Matt. Hi, I'm so excited to have you on the show.
I know, it's been a long time, right?
Yeah, a long time.
I think 16 years ago, you've been sat here doing a podcast.
I know. I don't think we knew what podcasts were back then.
No, yeah, you're probably right.
I joined the agency as the first social media manager that the agency had ever had. And I remember everyone going, what's social media? That's never going to work. That's never going to be a thing. I was like,
it's weird. It's weird because it was kind of like the offshoots of we were kind of building big web infrastructures, right?
Yeah.
Big kind of like global brands from a European perspective, and we were just kind of dipping our toe in the water in terms of what is all this social, and how can we get people to look at pizzas on Facebook or whatever it may be, That's it. That's what it was like, right? And we were just kind of like we do with a lot of this stuff that's coming through now. Even now, we're talking about AI, but it's almost you're just kind of playing around and seeing where it's going and going with the flow, and then seeing if you can try and get ahead and really, yeah, it's the same. It's interesting. It's the same times, but a different era, if you know what I mean.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. And it's all the young ones like I was back then that are now do this differently. And it's up to us to actually listen this time, I think.
Yeah. Still young at heart though. We all are, hopefully.
Of course. And before we hit record, I was just saying, God, this is going to bring my northern back out. My mank is going to come out in this conversation. I feel like I've lost it a lot because we're both living away from home, right?
Yeah, I think it's weird. People go, what did you just say then? And it's, for me, it's kind of quite normal. Some of the colloquialisms that I kind of use from Manchester, because I've kind of always stuck with it. My accent and has always been there. So sometimes people don't have a clue what I'm talking about, and I'm speaking too quickly, and it's not really the Queen's English, right?
Yeah.
I think that's for a bit further down the M6 as it is, or the M1. But I think, for those who don't know, that's a motorway in the UK. So I think, I'm proud of where I'm from.
Same, yeah, same. And I think it softened slightly as the years have gone by. But as soon as I speak to another kind of fellow man, I'm like, it all just comes flooding back.
We all understand the word we say by the end of it, right?
I know, but this is good. Maybe we'll get some views back home.
Right, love, crack on.
Right, okay. Let's talk about the high achievers trap. And you've spent over 3 decades in the fast-paced world of advertising.
Yeah.
Let's maybe paint a little bit of a picture, I think, to start with, about what this environment is actually like, and how it shaped your relationship with stress.
It's kind of quite interesting. I think the industry that we're in, which has always been kind of media, arts, and creative, has always been quite intense, right? There's a couple of things. I think the first thing from my own perspective is that you're either winning and doing great work, or you're pitching and you're losing. So you literally, if you're losing, it doesn't matter how much, and it's the same effort, and it doesn't matter what happens. You have to pick yourself up off the floor and start again, right? And I think that takes a certain amount of resilience, and you need the capacity from a mental perspective to really be able to deal with that. That's one side of it. I think the other thing is, I think it's like with all walks of life, but I don't know, within our industry, as we just discussed, it's constantly changing all the time. And to try and you're not only trying to keep up with all the advancements of the changes, but you're also dealing with competitors, and you're working with brands that are also as equally as demanding with these changes. And you're kind of constantly sometimes working with the unknown. So I think because of that, there is this like fast pace, these client demands, there's this, people wanting the best things all the time. And I think the reality is that our world is constantly changing all the time, and it's a fast pace, but we're kind of on that train, and it's very difficult to be able to get off, right? And the more we win, the more we do work, the more we're kind of getting into it, then the more passionate we become, the more enthused we are about it. And therefore then that kind of drives that. And I think that's where it kind of starts within the creative world. And I kind of think that's in the creative world as well. There's a lot of mental illness, right? So if we look at, singer-songwriters or authors, whatever it may be, they live and die by the next book that they write based on the reviews that they've got. We're in a similar world, right? Okay, we're selling brands, and we're doing advertising from that perspective, but we're exactly the same. We live in that world, and we live and die by our next job. And I think it depends on what people say and how they receive that as to, how successful we'll be, and we take that on board as well. So I think that kind of all comes together as part of the mental well-being, but also it's quite a stressful environment being in the world that we're in. People think it's all glossy and amazing, but it's pretty stressful.
Yeah, I think that one of the hardest things is always having to have fresh ideas, like new ideas, new thoughts, new insights. I always kind of found that quite hard to keep it fresh, especially like you said, if you've just had all of your ideas shot down in a pitch, and they didn't go with you, and it's hard, it's hard to kind of keep having a new perspective on the world that's going to kind of fuel new ideas and build campaigns or brands.
I've always been come across as being probably too passionate sometimes, but I think if you've got a passion and a love for what you do, and you're really about doing the right thing by your client, or for the brand or the project, and you really get into it. And honestly, it doesn't matter whether it's when I was working with you, I was working with tires, right? And it's black and round. But actually, if you get passionate about it and you really start to believe in it and you get it, then you can do some really interesting stuff with it. And I think, from my perspective, that's where you kind of you need that bit of inspiration. And you're talking about new ideas and fresh ideas. Well, yeah, you're right. But then consumers' habits and trends change over time, and I've learned over the years that strategically, as those trends change and things happen, then you have to kind of evolve with it as well. I mean, a really good example is I work in Saudi, right, and Saudi Arabia and the UAE and the Middle East. This is where I'm based. And trying to get insights from a consumer perspective is really difficult. So you have to look at different ways of being able to do that. And that's what creates the inspirational ideas. So it's not just about doing a focus group like you would do in Europe, but you've actually got to get on the ground in the subcultures of what's actually going on in Saudi Arabia, which is a a transforming region as it stands and where it's going. And you have to try and understand some of those cultural nuances and then see if they resonate and see how it works. But you also have to understand how those cultures work. So it's and operate to try and get the information that you want, if you know what I mean. So I think those fresh ideas that you're talking about, it's not just about sitting in a room and brainstorming, but it's actually about really being knowledgeable and understanding what's actually going on in culture, subculture, to try and drive where some of those ideas become and what they become based on being really relevant.
Yeah, it's I think a lot of people always ask me, is it like Mad Men? Because I think there's definitely like a work hard, play hard culture with advertising as well, which makes it a very fun industry, but also.
I wish I spent as much time in New York bars drinking whiskey. That things have changed a lot since then. But
yeah.
Is it a bit like that? I think there's probably a bit more science and a little. Well, there's a lot more science into it. I think there's a lot more there's a lot more brains into it. It's not just about the creative idea itself now. There's a whole load of stuff that kind of sits behind what we're doing now, which sometimes can be overcomplicated, right? I mean, from the days when we were working in digital, there weren't really information architects and user experience guys, and now there are, and they're looking at experiences and they're thinking about customer journeys and then where you need to tactically kind of trigger those motivations and behaviors within that, and then that becomes a science in itself. So there's kind of layer upon layer upon layer upon layer upon layer, and it gets quite complicated sometimes. But I think, things are always changing.
And the more senior you get, the more politics there are, and the more you actually realise is it's not as simple as clients liking the idea and buying the idea. That actually there's different layers to it when you've got procurement and you've got legal and you've got other things maybe going on in the background, that actually it's not you don't just win anymore on the best idea.
No, and I think that that's what I've probably learned over the last 15 years as I've kind of moved up the career ladder is that it's not where the stress comes from is not necessarily about the creative just ideas. It's about dealing with management. It's HR. It's dealing with bureaucracy. It's dealing with politics when you're working at a corporate level. And I think some of those things are the ones that kind of really start to get you down because they stop you they get in the way of you actually trying to do the job that you want to do and what you're passionate about. And I think also with that, in terms of management, you're still a leader, right? So when I talk about my own particular stress or mental well-being or whatever it may be, I think that takes its toll because you as a leader, you have to stand tall and you have to always have your door open and you have to be approachable. But then who's looking after you in your times when you're struggling and what you're actually going through? And I think, people don't really think about that a lot. And I think that's we think, all these CEOs and MDs and God knows what that are in the world, they're just incredibly successful and brilliant at what they do. And, it doesn't matter what they do, they're fantastic, but they've all got weaknesses. They've all got issues. Some of them may have mental health issues. Some of them may be alcoholics. Some of them hidden alcoholics that you don't know at night. It could be a whole raft of things. And I think that's because of the stress of the nature of that job, because the pressure that it puts on you. As you become more successful, it's more numbers, it's more targets, it's more revenue, it's better people, it's constantly, and with the advancements of the changes, it kind of builds and builds and builds. And there's only so much that people can, deal with that. And it's quite interesting when you see, people that are bringing in shrinks or psychiatrists to actually help with their management and help in terms of what they do. I can't remember the program, was it Billions, where they brought the psychologist in to help. I think there's a lot of industries that could lend itself well to do that because you do need it. It's a big part of, how you can grow, but also I think it's a big part of the issues that you face day to day in senior management in the corporate world.
Yeah, I think it's like a really fine line though, is that, between thriving on the stress, right? And it fueling you and it giving you energy. And like you said, it's this kind of hot mess of like stress and but passion and, great energy, and you're just riding a wave and you're getting through it. And then but you're on the knife edge between it like becoming too much.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but like I've definitely experienced living on that knife edge for like a long time, probably because I get so high when I'm loving the stress and I'm loving the passion and everything that's going on, that But then, as soon as I'm starting to kind of, I am on a knife edge. I don't know if that's the best way of explaining it, but I'd love to kind of hear your perspective on how stress can be good, at what point it's not,
So I think you talk about being on a knife edge, but being on a knife edge is you weren't on a knife edge when you were a young social media manager who wanted to break it in the world of, digital and advertising, right?
No.
Back in the days of Manchester. So I think that knife edge builds over time, but I think depending on the character that you are and the way in which your personality is and everything else, I think there are different levels of where you sit on that knife edge and when you get to it. If you think about it, we're working 10, 12 hours a day, sometimes more, sometimes less, but let's say we're working that. You're kind of living on the edge a little bit all the time because of the nature of the way your business is. And then what happens is that becomes almost like a natural drug, right? There's a reason why drug addicts, whether they're alcoholics or, they're taking cocaine or whatever it may be, the reason being is because they want more, okay? And they're going after it when there's a period of a low. Now, your period of a low might be when you're at home, or it might be at the weekend and you're like, well, what do I need to do? I need to go out and do something. So you might say, right, I need to go and buy something. I've just got to buy, I need to buy something for the garden, or I need to buy tools, or I need to do something and go out rather than just sit and read a book. I think what starts to happen is that sometimes that stress then starts to build into your private and your personal life as well, because you start looking for things to be able to do to kind of keep up and hold it. Do you know what I mean? And it could be, I want more kids, or it could be, it could be, no, I need to go and redecorate the whole house again, or whatever it may be. And I think you never get a time to just sit and relax and rest. And I'm sure we'll talk about it later on, but the recovery bit is so important in terms of what we do. And we don't really think about recovery in a way as normal human beings. We'll talk about it later, I suppose, as an athlete. But when you're in sports, you have to recover, right? Because if you don't recover, then you can't perform the following day. Well, it's exactly the same in our world. If you're not recovering, you can't think the following day. And if you're constantly on that knife edge and you go, it doesn't matter whether it's 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, or in my case, it's been off and on the knife edge. But, in 30 years, you end up falling off. And when you fall off, it's a big fall. And the hit's hard when you hit the ground,
Yeah. So tell us about your story.
What, from the beginning or from where I am now, or what?
No, you literally just said, that's what happened to me, 3 decades in, I fell off the knife, what happened?
So I think, listen, I've always kind of had this work ethic within what I do. I think my parents have always instilled that. I don't know if it's because of the north of England. I don't think it's got a lot to do with that. I just think, my parents were incredibly hard working and I looked up to them, and they, they both work really, really hard, and they kind of instilled that in me. So if you want any money and pocket money, it wasn't like it is today. It was, you go and do, I sound really old now, but you go and do a paper round in the morning and in the evening. So because of that, and then I understood the reward and the value of money and what I could spend on in my own things in my own way. And then that's kind of what built me to start with, right? So you had that pressure of, no one had to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to do a paper round on a cold day in January in Manchester, but I did. And I think because of that you kind of start to, that's where the stress starts, but you don't realize it at the time. And then you get into work and you want to get better. And then you go, you know what? No, I want to do a better job. I want to move on again. And I think all of a sudden it becomes a little bit like an addiction where you're just constantly wanting to be bettering yourself all the time. So, no one wants to stand still. Everyone wants to grow stronger, and that becomes a better version of yourself every day. And when you're built like that, you're constantly, I wouldn't say you're chasing your tail, but you're constantly looking for ways to improve all the time. All right. And I think it doesn't matter what you do in life, you kind of get to a point, and I've done it all the way through. I took up golf and I wanted to be the best golfer, and I want to be the best cook. So therefore I take control of the cooking, and in a way I don't think it's particularly healthy, but it's almost like these little building blocks that you don't really know that's building up to a period of time where you then sit on that knife. And my time came probably the start of 2024, early 2025. It wasn't COVID. It was post that. And I kind of got to a point when I kind of went, what the hell am I doing here? I'm tired. I'm not fulfilling life. I could sit and stare at a wall all day. And I've always kind of suffered from mental health a little bit. I know some of the triggers and have helped, but for me, I was like, I can't do this anymore. I'm done. And if I do, I'm not going to be here for much longer. It was literally that serious. My wife, bless her, love her to pieces. She was the one who, in a way, became the rescue. act and just basically said, look, you need to seriously sort this out. I am seriously worried about you. And I know when my wife's seriously worried, she, you don't see that side of her. And I had to go and speak to somebody, and I spoke to them, and I wouldn't say I was ashamed, but I was completely lost. I couldn't cope with the smallest things within work where people were coming to my door and asking for things, and I was completely lost. I was second guessing everything that was kind of going on all the time, and I'd just been broken. I'd been broken by everything, and I wouldn't say it was just work, but I did that whole way of life in terms of, that stress of what I've gone after and what I've done, and I got to a point, and the body just said, enough, Matt, you're shutting down. And I had to kind of reevaluate and look at everything, and I decided that if I'm going to live for the next 50 years of my life or longer, there's a new Netflix guy, the guy that wants to live forever. I don't think I'll be like him, but anyway.
Brian Johnson, yep.
Yeah, Brian Johnson. I think I had to look at things from a different perspective, and I had to make some brave decisions. And brave decisions are not the easiest thing to do when you're living in a lovely home, beautiful country, living the life. Dubai is, I'm sure it's the same, Singapore or anywhere else, but I'm very, very lucky to be where I am. And I decided, no, I'm not doing it anymore. And I gave up work. I wasn't going to do it. For the first time in my life, I've decided I needed something different. And I didn't know what it was going to be. I think it was going to be really scary. And I was lost for 3.5, 4, 5 months in terms of not doing anything. It was killing me, other than riding my bike, which I do a lot. And I think I was kind of lost, and I really struggled with the fact that I couldn't cope with the fact that I wasn't busy. I wasn't doing stuff. So I do a lot of endurance cycling. So I have events during the year, and I train really hard. I probably train about 14 to 20 hours a week, depending on what's going on in my training plan. Nutritionists and strength trainers and this, that, and the other. But that was kind of finished at 9 o'clock because you have to get up early here where I am because of the heat. So then there was the rest of the day, and I was like, yeah, but what am I going to do? So I kind of slowly started to get back into things, but I was completely lost. And I was on my own, and I had to try to figure it out. I went and spoke to a few people, I spoke to a few therapists, and one of them turned around to me and went, have you ever thought you might be addicted to stress? I was like, what do you mean? Stress addiction, is that a thing? I understand there's mental health issues. And he went, it sounds like you are addicted to stress. You have to be busy, you have to be doing stuff all the time, you have to be running at 110 miles an hour. And that was kind of the light that had hit me a little bit. It was like the lightning bolt that I needed to go, oh, what does that mean? And then I've had to try and break it down in terms of when a time's right for me, when do I need to stop, when do I need to relax, what do I need to do in those specific moments as well, which is not easy to do when you've been doing it for 30, 40 odd years. And it's made me look at everything a lot differently, because if I'm going to go into the next chapter of my life for the next 50 years, then I have to look at things completely differently, because otherwise I won't be here. And I think I've got children, and I've got a beautiful wife, and I need to be able to look after them and have a long life and an enjoyable life with them. And it's not all just about work and living life at 100 million miles an hour.
I just resonate with so much of that. I don't think I'm kind of quite at that peak, but just the thought of I'm a busy person, and I'm really trying not to be, but can't help it. Can't help just saying yes to things, because I get so excited by stuff, and I'm like, that's cool. Yeah, let's do that. Let's high rocks. Yeah, that sounds fun. Let's do that. When you're already training for a marathon, you're doing something else. And
but I think it's interesting you talk about the marathon stuff, because that for me is, and I suppose I do, like I said, I do a lot of endurance and a lot of training. But part of the training is first and foremost, it's understanding the data. So when I'm reading my power, I'm reading my heart rate, my data tells me sometimes if I'm trying to do a push in a session and I'm trying to get something up, my heart rate doesn't go up, it basically means I'm fatigued.
Yeah.
So I have a computer in front of me on my Garmin that sits there on my bike, and basically it's saying, red alert, you're fatigued, it's not going up, you need to rest. And we've got, the auras and the whoops and different things in this world that tell us that, right? But we don't put it into our everyday lives in terms of outside of sport. Now in sport, you would go recover. And in recovery can mean many things. It can mean sat there doing nothing. It could be an ice bath. It could be a gentle walk. It can be you could be putting on compression pants if you're a geek like me to try and recover, to get the blood circulating to recover again. But you have, my point is that you, through the data, you have a number of different programs that you can put in place to help you recover, to get you back where you need to get in the performance. Now, the interesting thing is that recovery is key, because if you recover, especially as you get older, because you need to recover more, right? If you recover in the right way and you do it properly and you listen to the body signs, then you perform at a better level, right? So if I'm in an endurance race, wherever it may be, I know where my recovery is versus where I need to do. And you build, so you build in building blocks, but you do it with a bit of recovery. At the moment, what we do is in corporate world and our working lives, we just go like that. And we don't look at any stops in terms of the building blocks where we go, right, stop, analyze, chill out. And it could be something that's just been at the weekend, sat, in the garden, reading a book. Or it could be, I'm on holiday, I need to really be thinking about things now. It's a big arrest, whatever it may be. But you need those points in your actual life and need to start. I'm not saying everyone can compartmentalize like that, but you kind of do it naturally. But if you don't have that, then you will get to a point, or certain individuals will, where they'll break. And there are some people that are really strong who'll never break. But there are other people mentally who can't get through it and they really struggle. So that might be somebody like me, right? And therefore, I think what's helped me is that the endurance side of the cycle has made me realize that, well, when you're playing it to your physical aspect of life, so your muscles won't work, you're not running, whatever it may be, why can't you do it for the mental side as well? And I think it's really, really, really important.
Yeah, you've just got me thinking about everything. And so, what type of protocols are you putting in place to give yourself that recovery in the corporate world with work?
I think you have to, one thing is you have to look at triggers and signs. So sometimes sometimes you're not aware of it. You might be so into it that it's untrue. But one thing I've had to learn is I have to completely slow down. So the beauty of what I'm doing now is, and I know you mentioned before, kind of launching a new agency yesterday, even that, if I'd done this 10 years ago, I would have done it at 1,000,000 miles an hour. I would have been launched, I would have been doing this, I would have been seeing clients, I would have been going over there. I've purposely decided not to do that. Starting very easy at home, 1 or 2 or 3 clients, just enjoy it, get back into the process again, come back, digest, do things in the right way, and almost not travel at 90 miles an hour, travel at 30 miles an hour, right? Because it's just as rewarding and it's just as good, and doing it at my own pace. And then what I'm doing is I'm putting in blocks of what I would call bits of recovery. So my recovery is not things like I'm going to sit and read a book. It might be, right, next week I'm going to Oman because I want to do some cycling in Oman in the mountains. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend a week there. There's my recovery, because I'm in a different environment doing things. I'm not in the office. Now, not everybody can do that. I'm very privileged and I'm lucky to be able to do that. But that's part of the recovery, right? I'm looking at doing different things in different ways to rehabilitate what I'm actually doing. And, and if I'm looking out in a beach or I'm looking at a mountain whilst I'm working, and that's a part of recovery. It's a different way of looking at things. And I think in our world now, I noticed that, I think it was it WPP that mentioned this week, going back to, the 4-day working week. I'm sorry, but there's a couple of things in there. They want to get rid of half the workforce anyway, because, they realise that, by doing that, people get fed up because of the work-life balance and leave. They need to do that anyway to cut costs. But I think the other side of it is that's where it shows that the corporate world a lot of the time is broken, because they're not really thinking about recovery for their employees. Recovery is not, we're going to bring chocolate round on a Friday, or give you a free coffee, or let you get off early on, Thursday at 4 o'clock. Recovery is proper fundamental things that actually affect you in your life. And I'm a big believer that trust becomes a part of that. But, and again, I'm going off on one, but it's really important to analyse what those recovery blocks are in your personal life. Actually, fulfill you, but also make you a better individual for what you're doing in life. And I think if you do that, then in the corporate world, any world, to be honest with you, it will make you a better person, more fulfilling, you potentially work harder, and so on and so forth. But those are the things that I think we need to be starting to look at.
I think it's also, we're just living in this world where more is more. And this is something that I definitely suffer from when I was working at Disney, and so I was doing social media and influencer marketing, and I was very much kind of prescribed to Gary Vee's model of more is more, of like just a volume model, and so I was constantly like, just keep putting more out, more out, more out, and I think, there's so many lessons in there about there's got to be a more efficient way of doing it, a more efficient way of doing the social marketing, a more efficient and effective way of working though as well,
But that's the beauty of AI, right? I think the beauty of AI is that AI can make us more efficient in the right ways, right? It doesn't make us lazy, but we have to be thinking about it different ways. So, for example, I couldn't believe it. Somebody showed me an application the other day which I looked at, and that application literally saved 3.5 hours of every day because it was playing on the background when we were doing Teams meetings. It could take all the context of the data that was in that meeting, the new business meeting. It could condense it into a 2-page summary, right? And then you could use that as part of the brief that you would give to, your team, or notes that you could then send back to the client saying this is what we've discussed. Normally, if you're doing a 2-hour meeting, that'd take hours to do because you've got to go back through your notes, you're writing, you're pulling stuff out, you've got to key it in, you've got to double check it. Now it's done for you. So my point is that there are tools, if we're clever from an operational perspective, that's going to make our lives so much easier. So we should be able to embrace them, right, and not fight them, but use them in the right way, not being using them in a lazy way. And I think so. You can find the time to do the things that you want to be able to do, right? It's just doing the right things.
But that's if you're not working for companies who are going, oh, well, if AI can do, 50% of your job for you, then we're going to give you another 50% to do, and we're going to cut, 25% of the workforce. I think it's also who you're working for as well, right?
To be fair, all employers, they have a duty to look after their teams and their staff when it comes to this sort of stuff. And we talk about stress management and everything else, but picking out the signs where it sits. And yeah, you can look at the bottom line from a P&L perspective, and trust me, I've been there. I've sat in board meetings and sat in RE meetings where we're talking about the next fiscal year and what we need to bring in and the pressures that are under us and so on and so forth. And with all due respect, these the types that sit there, that they're not interested in all the stuff that goes on from a day-to-day perspective. They're interested in a number, and that number is somebody else who's interested in a number. And the bigger people that sit on top of the corporate world are interested in another number. So as a result, it doesn't filter down in terms of the day-to-day. So it's down to, the likes of yourself within that particular world to try and, what I would say, care in a way. And you have a duty of care to your team to actually try and make a difference. And it's not just, initiatives for initiative's sake, but it's the little things that you can do that I think sometimes I can say it now because I've left, but can sometimes go against the grain of the corporate world. So I remember I had some mums working with me, right? Incredibly hardworking, and their part of their world was, I want to go away for 4 weeks, and I want to work for them 2 weeks. My kids need to be away. I want to spend some time with them, and I want to be, I don't know, in Croatia, right? I'll be like, okay, fine. But the working policy would be, you can only be away for 2 weeks, and then you need to be back a week.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how does that work? These mums that they're working till 5, 6, 7, 8 at night. They're taking calls when it's bath time. Give something back a little bit. And I think if we had a little bit more of that, then the talk about the stress, which is what we're talking about, would be alleviated a little bit, so you're not on that knife edge. And I think it's really important that we kind of look at that. We're not just chasing numbers all the time.
That's got to be, you've got to lead by example though, right? And maybe 5 years ago you weren't doing that because you were doing the working a million miles an hour, right?
I was working a million miles an hour. But again, I put it down to you will break at a certain point. You will see some of the signs. I've seen it in teams. Mental health is a really good example where you see people becoming really aggressive or they become really reclusive. And you see it within the workforce, but no one goes, hey mate, you all right? How's everything? And I think you need to be able to look at these signs, but it's not just me. It needs to be, the people that are working with them every day and being able to put an arm on the shoulder and going, look, and then being able to create a support network around that and a support program. And a support program isn't sometimes going to a shrink. It could be just like, we just need to lay off a little bit, not give them so much work, just get them, back to what they need to be, give them a bit more work-life balance at this particular stage. But I don't think enough of that kind of goes on. And I'll be honest with you, from my perspective, when you're running at 1,000,000 miles an hour, you're right. 10 years ago, I would have gone, well, why is he not working hard? He needs to be working hard. He's lazy. What do you mean he's not? He's leaving at 5 o'clock every night, or he's not in at 8, or he's standing over his desk because he's happens. It's not acceptable anymore in the world. And I think we have to change a lot.
Sometimes it takes it to happen to you to then to go, okay, I've got to change.
Yeah.
So we've just been talking a little bit about recognizing the signs and impact of maybe stress or a bit of stress, and maybe even stress addiction as well, right? Because, I think it's quite easy to see when someone's stressed, but you don't always know if someone's addicted to stress. And so what are those signs? Like, what's the difference?
I think when someone's suffering from stress addiction, they're difficult to deal with. They're not approachable. They're very, they've got this doggedness about them around, unwilling to be compromised, don't want to change, everything is their way. And I think they can't see the bigger picture.
Unwilling to stop, unwilling to let things go. If they're committed to getting stuff done and doing things, like they want to see it through, like they're unwilling to rest.
But I think yes, there is some of that. But then I've seen other people that are stress addicted that also are stressed in other ways, but don't do the work, if you know what I mean. So I can see it on both sides, but I think a lot of it is around just not knowing when to stop and when to breathe. Creatives especially, right? If you've got a creative block, the natural thing to do is to try and do more. Yeah. Right, and 9 times out of 10, you do more, you get more crap, right? And it just goes on and on and on. Usually, when you're fresh and and every creative will argue, because they like to, my best ideas are when I'm under loads of pressure and I've been in a pub or whatever, and I came up with this amazing idea like this. And I'll be honest with you, 9 times out of 10, you look at the idea in the morning and it's a disaster, right? So the kind of this belief that we have to work so hard to the point of exhaustion where anything decent comes out. Actually, I don't believe that. I think if you're working in a controlled environment, where not necessarily controlled, but you're working in an environment that is pleasant to work in, it's easy, it's approachable, it becomes a lot more easier to come up with greater ideas because you're more relaxed, right? It's like when you play golf. You don't play golf and you're still like this and you're trying to, when you hold the ball as hard as you can, the ball just goes nowhere. If you're relaxed and you're chilled and it's normal human behavior.
The thing that got me is the not knowing when to stop. Like I'll run myself into the ground because I'll be like, well, I've committed to doing all of these things.
Yeah.
And I'm like.
But are you enjoying it?
Most of the time, yeah.
Even when you're absolutely completely fatigued and you have nothing left.
When you're hitting that point, so an example will be I ran the Singapore half marathon at the end of last year, and hadn't really trained for it, but I'm pretty fit anyway. And I was like, but I went out way too fast. First half flew, second half completely crashed. Just hated every second of it. Was miserable, and then I could not for about 4 days afterwards lower my cortisol. I was in fight or flight. I was panicky. I was anxious. I felt like I was still running. And it was 4 days afterwards.
Yeah.
And it was so stupid. I was just so annoyed with myself because I just didn't know when to stop. I didn't know, I know that I should have not gone off so fast, but I got swept up in it all, you know, and.
Well, that's normal, right? I mean, I've been in races where you've been in exactly the same situation, but I think what you have to do is you have to take on board and you have to use it as a bit of a learning curve. It's interesting you talk about afterwards, because it's almost like when I do events and afterwards I get to a point and I'm pretty low and down after them. And the reason being is that because I have nothing, you know what it's like. If you're working towards something, then you do it and you're successful, you do whatever time that you want to do, whatever it may be. That's it. There's nothing else. It's empty. It's almost like you're like, shit, now what? Okay, you might have a beer and celebrate and just wind down, or do whatever, but then you're lost. You're completely lost because all of a sudden you're not training for anything anymore. You've got no goal. You don't know where you're going, and it's very difficult to say, oh well, I'll go back to doing the stuff that we were doing from a personal perspective, and I'll sit around the garden, because you've been conditioning yourself for a certain amount of time. So this is what happens. You then go on to the next one, and then the next one. I'll never forget, my wife said to me, I'm doing one Ironman, and then I'm never doing another one again. And I said to her, I guarantee you, the day that you finish yours, the following day you'll decide and sign up to do another one. And she did exactly that. Why? Yeah. Because she got to a point and she went, this is amazing. This feeling is just like so cool. Then you do it again and again and again and again. So I think we do become addicted to it. To your point is, when is there a point when you stop? I don't think we do. We just need to be able to, we just learn to manage it in a different type of way.
So that's it, right? As high achievers, as people who always looking to optimize our performance, do more, we get it. It's part of life, like really enjoy it, the passionate about it's not about stopping, right? It's about finding the balance.
The balance is key. I think it's, especially if you're in the work environment, it's about, it really is, it's stopping, it's resting, it's thinking about things for yourself that you potentially want to do. I think it's pivotal moments in a particular year. So it could be, going on a holiday. It's small things and big things, right? It sounds daft, but those are things that I think you actually need to alleviate the stress, right? So, I mean, you talk, I've stopped drinking, right? And I like a drink. But so my point at night is 6 o'clock, I come home, or 7 o'clock, come home, and I think, I'll have a glass of wine now. I've deserved it, I've had a day. But if I'm going to do what I'm doing from a cycling perspective, I've got to stop. I can't do that. So I need a trigger to change that trigger, right?
Yeah.
So my trigger is now I go and walk the dog. 6 o'clock every day, when that trigger comes in, or if it's about to pop in, I go and walk the dog. And I walk the dog for as long as I'm going to be pouring that first wine or even think, and then the thing disappears. So I think you have to look at other triggers that can try and change the pattern of behavior, if you know what I mean. And I think it's the same in stress. You see it and you know what's going on. You understand where that is. Then you go, oh, okay, now we stop.
Yeah, I think I didn't really even think about applying some of the learnings that I had about going alcohol free, or even learnings that I've got from my training and the data and the recovery and sleep and all of those things. I just never really thought about applying it to work.
Yeah, you have to. The thing is, you have to, right? Because we don't have data in front of. I don't have a computer. Well, you do now with Aura and recovery and HRV and everybody else, right? And I'm constantly addicted to it. I'm looking at it all the time. And it's but the interesting thing is for me is that, and we all know this, is that since I've stopped alcohol, my recovery's gone through the roof.
Of course, yeah.
but it doesn't mean as I'm performing as better. So my question in my mind is, well, I could still have a glass of wine and I'm still going to perform the same. I can still perform the same. It's not a big deal. But that's not the point, right? Because you're actually putting you something that's actually bigger. Now, the interesting thing is behind that is I'm actually putting my body under stress and my mind under stress because I've decided to stop alcohol. So that's another stress in itself. Because I actually want to drink. I enjoy it, right? It's not a big deal. And, the fact that I'm now having to go out this evening to an event and I'm not going to drink, and everyone else is, it's a stress.
Yeah, you're thinking about it, yeah.
You're thinking about it. You're oh, God, do you really? I've got to do Diet Coke, whatever. But my point is, there's something bigger that you're working towards. So with stress, again, it doesn't matter what the stress trigger is, if alcohol's one thing or it's another, but what are you working towards? So what I would say is people that are struggling for stress, and I suppose it's a bit like when we're with strategy, right? One thing I ask about when I'm with brands, sorry if I'm going off for a minute, but I'm going to bear with me. I go, what's your exit strategy? So the exit strategy might be I'm going to IPO, or I want to take on this company, or I want to go and live in the Caribbean on a nice beach, whatever it may be. They'll have an exit strategy of some sort. You go, okay, if that's the exit strategy, what are we going to put in place to actually build you to try and get you where you need to get to? My argument would be with every single person, if they were to walk away from this today, is go, what's your exit strategy as a human being? Because it's not even something I've thought about. It's just almost like, what does that look like? Now people go, oh, it's a nice retired home, living in Wales, or it's, I have a nice place living in France or whatever. But no, something more meaningful than that. Not when you're retired. What does life look like? What do you want to enjoy? What do you want to do? And then start to think about, okay, well, what's going to make me a better person, or what's going to put me a person in place that actually is going to allow me to do these things? Because I think that will help alleviate some of the stress, right? To get you where you need to get to. And I'm talking about purely from an emotional perspective now. I'm not talking about in terms of just monetary value or anything else, but something that's a bit more meaningful.
You've got me thinking now.
Well, that's the whole point, right? I think the whole idea is that, what exit? What does it look? And it's not something I really looked at a little bit, but I'd like to have a lot of a less stressful life, an easier life, more chilled. As I'm getting into my second part of my life, I like to think of it like that. I'm actually going to treat it differently to the first. It's almost like I'm at half time in a football match. I've kind of looked at it, and the first half's been great. It's been, we're at four goals up. Everything's fine, but I can't keep running around for 90 minutes at the pace that I've been doing in the first half. The second half, I need to be able to sit. I need to put the foot on the ball. I need to chill out a little bit. I need to take it all in. I need to take in the crowd. I need to look at it. Okay, I might want to score the odd more goal or whatever it is, but I want to enjoy it. And I think we're kind of in that period where, well, what does that actually look like? What is our equivalent of life of looking out in the crowd and going, yeah, I'm going to appreciate this, or, just trying something a little bit different. I don't know what it may be, but I think that's where I came to in terms of, to your point of being on the knife edge and then saying, right, I can either carry on like this and not exist, or if I do exist, I'm going to be a very unhappy man, right? Probably divorced, probably estranged from my children, probably not very happy in life. I'll be getting by, but what quality of life is that? Or do I seriously need to look at what I'm actually doing and go, I need to change. I need to fundamentally change if things are going to change in the future.
I really like that kind of analogy, just the whole kind of the way you were just talking about the football game then, and rest and time and being more present and just enjoying the small things and those moments and not being so busy all of the time.
Someone said to me once, which I thought was the best thing, and I wish I'd taken more advice of it. When you're on your deathbed, and this is for the corporate world, and it sounds quite morbid and morose, but I don't mean it to. And this is more for corporates, and well, not corporates, but generally in working life. When you're on your deathbed and you've got your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren and your children around you, the last thing you're going to be thinking about is the last deal that you did at work or what you're on. Yeah. You're going to be thinking about the things that you've done with your family and your life and those sort of things. And those are the things that are important. And if that's in the back of your mind, that's what you should be working towards.
And you know what's really funny is like, I've got I kind of do a little kind of gratitude list before I go to bed every night. And every day it's the small things. What I'm really noticing, it's the cuddles that I got with my daughter before bed. It was the funny joke that my son told us. It was, having a really gorgeous, healthy home cooked meal. It was getting up and going for a run at sunrise. And it is so funny. It's like, those are the things, those are the moments that made the days. What moment of the day, meant the most to you?
If we're talking about the context of stress, they're moments of recovery.
True.
Mini moments of recovery. So yeah. in sport, we would look at those moments of recovery and we go, right, that really worked for us there. So I'm going to do more of that because I can recover better and become a better athlete. Why can't you take those moments of, kids cuddling or sun telling a joke or you seeing the sunset on a run or whatever it may be, and use those and think, right, those moments, what are they? I need to do a little bit more of those every day. A bit like me walking the dog, right, at 6 o'clock. Same thing.
Yeah. Because
that's leading to the bigger thing, but it's just stopping and looking at it like that, which, we write all these notes and we do these things, and we probably just, I'm not saying we do, but we put them in a drawer and then we do the following thing the following day.
Yeah. Matt, turns out you're pretty wise.
No, not really. Wise, silver and old.
Who knew? Who knew?
I need to take those practices myself now.
I know, right? You'll be writing a list at the end of this going, oh, right, okay, I need to take my own advice. No, I love it. I love it. This has actually been a great conversation. I'm really, really just value your time and your wisdom and sharing it. And the, any just kind of final advice you've got for sustaining it, because it's so easy to like slip back into it. What have you put any protocols in place to stop yourself going down that road again?
It sounds really a bit weird, but it's almost like you need to be disciplined with things that you're doing. And if you say you're going to do it, then do it, right? There's a reason why athletes are so successful. The ones that are successful is because they're really disciplined in their approach with a goal to whatever it may be. I think with our lives and having a fulfilling and rewarding life, we have to be disciplined in that way. And we have to look at what are the mechanics that we're doing, but then start to look into some of those things to create more meaning out of it. So, the things that, your journal or the things that you're writing, then you need to review. And for me, looking at those things and then start to kind of compartmentalize those. Sounds complicated, but I don't mean it to, in terms of strategically go, right, I need to do more of this stuff. I need to, and I almost have them as visual reminders. I'm a big believer in visual reminders, because I think if you start to do that, then it starts to become a cycle where it becomes repetitive, and then you become used to it. And they'll change and they'll adapt over time. But I think that's the best way of dealing with it, to be honest with you.
Yeah. And so there's probably a step before that where it's like just awareness, like self-awareness of, what you're doing, how much you're enjoying them, how much you're giving to those things, the reasons why you're doing those things. And, and then trying to kind of find, okay, you've got the things that are maybe taking a lot of your energy. So how are you recovering, and what are those recovery? And then once you know that, being really disciplined to make sure you're getting enough of that recovery, and managing the flows of kind of that huge energy output.
I think sometimes as humans, we're very stubborn with what we think is right and when wrong. But listen to our loved ones. My mum and dad were here for 4 or 5 weeks, and I'm quite a proud kind of man. I don't want to talk about my problems with mental health or this, that, and the other. And my dad, he came into my office here and he just sat down and he just said, it was about 2 days before he left, he just said, "Are you all right?" He said, "Is there anything I can help you with?" And I was like, whoa, now my dad knows, right? And it was a bit of a thing, and I didn't want to talk about it at the time. But that trigger, that moment, even just in doing that, has made me really think about things from a different perspective. Not because I want to let him down or anything else, but just, actually, I need to look after myself as well. So don't underestimate the power of loved ones in the relationship of you managing your stress, because they're the ones who will see it first, and they're the ones that really care. And it's about, listening to them, because sometimes we can be quite stubborn around that. So, yeah.
You just make me smile on the stubbornness, because I'm pretty famous for that. So.
We all are, right? But I think we have to listen sometimes as well.
Yeah, my husband's always on at me about the sunk cost fallacy. And he's like, you don't always have to see everything through to the end. You don't always have to finish everything. Like, I know because I'm one of these people, I want to finish what I start. But he was like, sometimes it's okay to walk away, and it's okay to let things go, especially if it's causing you more stress and draining your energy.
Completely agree with that. I remind you that when you're halfway through a marathon.
Yeah. Exactly. Matt, mate, I've loved talking to you. That hour went so quick, and it's just been really great, really inspiring, and just so nice to catch up after all these years. I wish you all the best with am I going to say this right? NoBull Partners?
NoBull Partners, yeah.
Love the name. Just tell us about the name. Come on.
No, listen, it's quite simple. Sick of the world in which we live in. Sick of people kind of creating a lot of, I'll use the word crap in this, and talking a lot of crap for the sake of it. And just in our industry, there's quite a lot of vanity, awards for awards' sake, egos, lots of C-level titles, see this, see that. And I get to the point where I was like, I've had enough. And the whole point behind the agency is to cut the crap out of what we're doing, get down to some good old-fashioned northern values and down to earth and saying how things are and saying how it is, and hopefully, cutting the crap out of the industry and trying to turn it on its head and deliver something a little bit different, an alternative that disrupts what's going on out there. So yeah.
Oh man, I love that so much. And that northernness, that mank, that grit, has got us both far.
Yeah.
So proud of that and keeping that part of me close, for sure. But I love it. All the best. I'm going to link to the everything below. So send me all of your links. We'll link to everyone below. So if anyone wants to connect with Matt, please do so. He's awesome. If you want to talk about stress, you want to talk about creative work, the industry, cycling, he's got you.
Yeah, cycling, definitely.
But everyone still listening, thank you so much. As always, please, if you like this episode, share it with some friends, family, and let me know what you think. Please subscribe as well. It really helps. And yeah, thank you very much. And I'll see you soon. Bye.